action shelf. The action shelf. The action shelf.
Welcome to the Action Shelf. Podcast celebrates the glory of B action movies. I'm John Campbell.
I'm Michael Listman.
Was that Michael Listman, or was that the cyborg of Michael Listman?
I am Michael Listman. Beep, bye, boop.
You know what? That's better.
You can tell
Cyborg.
the difference because one is stop motion animation, John.
Yeah. One is a cheaply constructed animatronic that we've built of Michael Listman.
That has soulless eyes when you stare at it.
Well, we go into our second week here of Jean-Claude Van Damme, a month celebrating the man, the myth, the legend that is Jean-Claude Van Damme, but focusing, as we've said, sort of on the earlier years of Van Damme, and you know, what would be complete without this sci-fi masterpiece? And so we brought on someone who knows a thing or two about sci-fi masterpiece. Mike Gorgone.
How dare you? Yes, I am Mike Gorgone, sci-fi masterpiece expert, and you brought me on for this schlock.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we've got like the Matrix, we've got Cyborg. What else is in this same league? We've got perhaps
Blade Runner,
Odyssey.
Yeah,
Blade
2001.
Runner maybe.
There's a lot of Blade Runner in this movie. No, you know what?
What the hell?
I'll tell you what I immediately thought watching this movie. They were very much going, you know what's big? Mad Max and Terminator. Can we somehow kind of jam those two things together, but also put more martial arts in it? And that brings us to 1989 Cyborg.
Yeah.
Because let's see, the first three Mad Max films had already come out by the time this movie was released.
Yeah. And
So,
this is between the first two Terminators.
right. Oh, I mean, you can tell because like the second Terminator obviously changed the game in terms of action films.
Right.
But this movie hadn't been told that game was going to be changing yet.
No. This is still very much playing on, like, they're still trying to play catch up to the first movie's effects. So, and this is, once again, much like last week's movie Kickboxer, brought to us by the fine folks at the Canon Entertainment Group.
Yes,
Menachem
Golden Globus are in full effect here.
Yoram Globus and Menachem Golan are producers on this thing, as if you couldn't tell.
Yeah, I could tell. Like, even if the starting credits weren't there, I would be able to tell.
It does definitely have some classic canon sheen to it.
Well, okay. I will like to point out the big discrepancy between this movie and that rich canon, if you will, of other sci-fi classics that we have talked about just now. Is we have a lot of these films like Blade Runner. Our titular character is in fact a Blade Runner. You have the Matrix. The whole movie revolves around the idea of the Matrix. What is the Matrix? You have the Terminator, the titular Terminator who is going to terminate you and is the primary bad guy of the movie. So when I go into a movie starring Jean-Claude Van Damme called Cyborg, my expectations are a roboticized Jean-Claude Van Damme is going to be machine kicking the shit out of people. I am all on board.
Well,
only to discover
that would be great.
That the titular Cyborg is a tertiary character who appears in 3 scenes and is barely in the movie.
It is insane that
And it's ultimately not part of the plot.
Not really. It's sort of this other like plot happening in the background that sort of loosely connects. It doesn't even connect. More, it just kind of like meets up with Van Damme's plot here and there. They just kind of brush up against each other.
Yeah.
It moves parallel to the main plot of the film at best. And if we weren't told about it, it wouldn't be relevant.
It's so weird
Yes.
because,
Yeah.
like you're saying, Jean-Claude Van Damme and Cyborg, I expect one of two things. Either first, yes, he is the cyborg, or two, he needs to stop the cyborg, and it's neither of those things. Like,
it is neither of those, yeah.
because I'm going, this is one of those where I watched so many of his movies as a kid, I'm going, I probably saw this. I don't know, though, but so this is the first time I've watched it, though, or maybe, and I'm going, okay, yeah, in my memory, he's got to fight the cyborg. Now, I also may be thinking of another Van Damme movie, too, because they're all... Now, I will just say, look at his other... if you want to see that better movie, go watch Universal Soldier, right? That's the one that actually has, like, souped-up sci-fi Van Damme fighting, also Super Soldier Dolph Lundgren. That's a great time at the cinema. Or even something like Time Cop. He is a time cop. They're not bearing the lead. He is indeed a cop of time in that movie.
Yes, indeed.
Or the time cops are not a subplot in that movie.
No, it is.
No.
It's very important to the plot that he's a time cop.
Or go watch Street Fighter, where he in fact fights on some streets.
He definitely does.
I mean, he's coked out of his mind, but he does do that.
Yeah.
I mean, who isn't?
You know, we promise we will cover Street Fighter at some point on this show. That will happen.
Yeah.
But no, here we are in 1989. Cyborg, written and directed by our old pal Albert Pyun.
Albert Pyun, yeah.
I don't know if I'd go as far as pal.
We've spent a lot of time with him on this show. This is our third or fourth movie of his,
right?
Yeah, I think so.
Third. We did Blast, we did Crazy Six, and I think this is the third.
And you know what?
I think this is the most Albert Pyun film we've seen out of those three.
I was gonna say also, as weird as this movie is, it's maybe the best of the ones we've watched because the other ones are real bad. This one is, well, this one's still bad, but it's it's I don't know.
It's audaciously bad, you know. It's
yeah. It's got a vision. Okay, I like he seems to be trying for something. Blast is a totally checked out. Crazy Six literally doesn't make it's just nothing. This is
there's nothing in that film.
This is well, I mean, this is the good folks at Canon. Though
this movie is aggressively boring. Like it dares you to not pay attention to it.
This is the big existential question I had after finishing this movie yesterday. How can a movie with this much action be this boring? Because there is near constant action in the film, and yet it's so boring. And it's
I can answer
86
this question.
minutes. Okay, Gorgone, take it away.
The reason this movie is so boring, well, one of the reasons, there are multiple reasons, but
Sure.
Part of the main thrust here is that we don't fully understand the stakes of the film until the last 20 minutes of the movie, which can be an effective storytelling tool. But the fact that the main plot of the film is our JCVD's character, whose name is never said in full, but on the credits is listed as Gibson Rickenbacker. I think he's mostly called Gibbs in the movie.
Yeah, or Slinger.
Or just Slinger.
Right. Why isn't this movie called Slinger? Anyway,
well,
that was what Albert Pyun wanted the name.
Well, you know why? This goes back to, as always, right, with the Canon movies, how they sold these. They would make up a poster and a title and attach a star and then sell the movie and figure out what was going to... So they just sold Jean-Claude Van Damme and Cyborg and then had to figure out what that was. Now, that it came to this is insane.
But there are two big factors on why I think this movie is so boring. One, the main bad guy doesn't realize he is the nemesis of our main character until the last fight of the movie.
Yes.
And two, every single action sequence in this film really overuses this filmmaking tool that can be effective sometimes, but is mostly just really lazy way of padding out screen time, which is the multiple takes of the same action beat happening over and over and over again, to the point where there are punches and kicks that happen in certain fight sequences in this movie that are literally just the key frames you see repeated 3, 4, 5 times over and over and over again, to the point where you check out of the kinetic energy of the fight.
This is a technique we've seen from Canon before. In fact, just last week in Kickboxer.
Yeah. Yes.
They also did
it happens a lot in JCVD films as well, because he'll do some impressive kick and they're like, let's just keep showing it over and over again.
And then sometimes that can work. Here it is, and I will say I have a lot of background about the making of this movie that will explain a lot of what we saw. So, but first I want to ask you guys, how much do you think this movie cost in 19...
I had to stop myself from looking this up because I knew it was going to be asked, but I was so curious.
It is a very interesting answer. Take your best guess. It's 1989. This is a much humbled canon at this point. They've already lost a lot of money on some big swings.
So Listman, this is what I'm going into the information I'm going in with. We've got a lot of set dressing, but a lot of set dressing in like very contained areas. We never have any wide shots that aren't just like a swamp that could be anywhere.
Yeah. Yes. Exactly.
The thing that I think is demanding a lot of money in this is the few sequences of Cronenbergian cyborg body horror that we get that are like, they're not approaching like Phil Tippett level like mastery, but they're honestly not bad.
The one scene where it has that kind of stuff was, for the time, relatively impressive. I know some background stuff about how the sets and costumes were chosen for this movie.
Yes.
So, but that throws a wrench in it because a lot of money was spent on other films that were funneled into this. So I don't know where the line is
just to say that what Listman is referring to is much of the costume, specifically the costumes and some of the set pieces, are reused from Cannon's production of Masters of the Universe.
Yes, I totally could see that. Absolutely.
This movie was specifically designed after that movie lost them so much money to be like, oh shit, okay, we gotta regroup and reuse what we have on hand
really quick.
With all that being said, I'm gonna say $5 million.
Gorgone says $5 million. Listman?
I'm gonna say $1 million.
I don't know if this is gonna impress you guys then. $500,000.
Whoa!
This movie cost $500,000. $500,000. This was them really going, we need to make something real fast for no money with pretty much just stuff we have lying around.
I think my guess, what that is to me, is me underestimating how cheap JCVD was at this point in time.
Well, yeah, this is still, he's coming off of Bloodsport, because the poster even declares Jean-Claude Van Damme, star of Bloodsport. Which was big for Cannon, and I think this is
that was the previous year, right?
I believe so. And this and Kickboxer come out the same year.
Okay, but we don't get like Double Impact and Universal Soldier for a couple more years, so it wasn't quite as like icon. We were still 5 years out from him playing himself in Last Action Hero.
Yeah. That's the thing is that's kind of what we're doing with this year's JCVD month. Is we're kind of tracking that rise of stardom. Next week we'll cover Lionheart, which is kind of the first one that was at least released by a studio, even if it was independently made. Universal put it out. So we're sort of watching the rise of his star across this month of episodes. So he's done Bloodsport, which burst him on the scene, and then this is in the same year Cannon puts him in both Kickboxer and Cyborg. In fact, this movie was originally designed as a Chuck Norris vehicle.
Oh, it would be so much worse if it was Chuck Norris too.
It was designed as a Chuck Norris vehicle, but because Bloodsport was so popular, Cannon was like, how about you put JCVD? This is kind of our new guy. We're kind of moving away from Chuck. We really see the potential. The thing that's so interesting about JCVD is they really made him. Like, they did hit on the next big action star, but they were already hemorrhaging money too much to actually do anything with him. So it is other people who will ultimately reap the rewards of Van Damme.
JCVD got a bit of a golden parachute from like the collapse of canon.
Absolutely, because he does Bloodsport, Black Eagle, which we will cover at some point. That's the one with him and Shokasugi. And then Cyborg, Kickboxer, and then Canon's done. And then it's all like Universal picks him up and stuff and continues on with the Lionheart, Death Warrant, Double Impact, Universal, so all that, the big ones. Yeah. So I think that's very key here. But yes, this is a Canon going, Jesus Christ, we're in so much trouble. In fact, this is the last theatrically released film from the Canon Entertainment Group.
Wow.
Gorgone, you've been here for 2 milestones of Canon. This is the last theatrically released Canon film, and then you also did Hellbound with us, which was just the last film they ever made, period.
Yeah, I am the prophet of Canon's death rattle.
You're gonna have to when we're eventually gonna do an entire summer devoted to Canon. I think next year we've talked about doing Canon summer, so you'll have to come in for only the moments that like wound them deeply.
Right. So, oh Jesus, that means I have to come back for fucking Masters of the Universe. Damn it.
Oh, yeah. I think we might have already just put you down for that.
Yeah, I've willed that into existence now.
Yeah,
God
you did. That movie's insane. But yeah, this was them, and actually 500,000 worldwide gross, 10.1 million. So
yeah.
But it kind of didn't matter.
Money, yeah.
It kind of didn't matter. They'd already blown through a lot of cash.
I'll say this much: this movie isn't good, but
Lord no.
For $500,000,
I know
this is kind of a triumph.
That's what I said. Like that's what I was saying. When I tell you this number, it's somewhat impressive that the movie looks like anything.
There's scenes on a boat. They don't overuse stock footage all that much. There's actual like matte paintings in certain.
The biggest thing
areas.
is the physical resources. It is like we already have armor lying around. So I mean, it was specifically designed. It is, I guess, a good job if you're just going to cull things you already have. Now, here's the okay. Just before we get into the deep plot, let me just paint you a picture of the production.
Plot.
Yeah, the deep plot of this movie. But let me paint you a picture of this movie, all right? Albert Pion's original cut of Cyborg was in black and white.
Yes.
Yeah, it had it had an all-rock score. It was much more violent. Van Damme was entirely dubbed with an American voice. It was much more dark.
Not shocking,
violent, and cynical. Canon held a test screening of the version of the film for a small audience. Out of the 100 people it was shown to, only one person liked it, apparently.
Wow.
That was Albert Pion. No, due to this, they fired Pion and had Van Damme edit the version of the movie we watched. So the version we watched is the one cut by Van Damme and his Bloodsport collaborator Sheldon Lettich, and the two of them recut the movie to cut out all the boring sci-fi shit and really focus in on the fighting.
So they're to blame for the stuttering kick cuts.
Yeah, they let edit the film because they also were responsible for the final edit of Bloodsport, and so that was the thing where it's yeah, their whole thing was like more kicking, less boring shit. Now I've never apparently on his website Albert Pion recut the movie closer to his vision and released it as Slinger, the director's cut of Cyborg. I've never seen it, but apparently those who have it is considerably more violent.
I mean, this movie is already pretty violent.
Well, his version is really
bloody gore.
There are multiple scenes of decapitated heads on sticks.
Yeah.
Our main character is crucified in this film. We have scenes of limbs getting cut off. I mean, I will say this about the movie. It has some of the most tasteful dismemberment I've seen of a Canon film.
It does, yeah. Apparently, a lot of it was just like they talk about the scenes. There's much more graphic depictions of the violence that's already here. So much more blood from throat slits, a good deal more of the village massacre and bodies and stuff like that. Yeah.
There is a skinned corpse tied to a post at one point in this film. You're saying it gets worse than that?
Apparently so. Apparently in this
Cool.
version of it.
Great.
God, I have no
How about
interest in
here's the
watching
funniest
it.
thing though. This film, because I don't know at this time, I don't know how much you guys are familiar with the video nasties deal in England, where like the home video market in the UK was so heavily censored. It's famously like you can hear Edgar Wright talk about it and stuff. There's a whole documentary about it I recommend called Video Nasties, all about this idea of like we aren't getting the real movies, so we got to get bootlegs of violent movies from the US. But
Isn't there a whole like backstory of like the UK market is part of the reason why the Ninja Turtles don't use their weapons in the second
correct,
Ninja Turtles movie?
correct, because depictions of ninja weapons,
Nunchucks.
yeah, specifically nunchucks, was at that time not allowed on screen in the UK. But here's the funny thing about this: the VHS,
The most dangerous weapon known to man.
this is an 86.
Nunchucks.
So this is an 86-minute movie. The UK home video cut of this movie, 54 minutes.
Wow.
No, it doesn't even make feature length.
movie.
The VHS release in England, because they cut out all the violence they deemed too extreme.
So this movie, on a plot level, already doesn't make a ton of sense.
No.
I can only imagine what cutting
Unwatchable,
a
right?
solid 40 minutes out of this film would do.
It's got to be unwatchable. Yeah.
Yeah. I would not be able to follow it at all.
No, and I already
At all.
basically can't follow
Struggle.
it because it's kind of impossible
Yeah.
to follow.
I mean, no, as soon as you stop worrying about anything to do with cyborgs or what that has to do,
Yeah,
it's a pretty simple revenge chase movie.
I guess that's the thing. My mistake for assuming the title was important.
Yeah, that's on you, John.
Yes.
Sorry, that's too much to ask from Pion.
It took about 20 minutes for me to click into the fact that, like, okay, Van Damme is our main character.
Yeah.
Don't worry about any of the cyborg stuff because it's not relevant.
And get ready for. I love every time the villain in this movie is also amazing. Fender Tremolo.
His name
Is he Vincent Klein?
Yes,
Vincent
Vincent
Klein,
Klein.
yeah. We've seen him.
Fender as the name of a bad guy. First off, I think there's only three names said in the whole movie. Four, if we count the cyborg. Her name is Pearl.
Yeah, Pearl
and
Prophet.
her name is screamed a couple. Okay, the credits say Pearl Prophet. That's an awesome name. They never say her last name in this film. They don't say anyone's last name in this film. I don't know why everyone is credited with last names when they never say them.
It's just from the script, I'm sure. Because I think we talked about this last week. Listen, when we were, or at least we may have talked about it off mic. But every character in this movie is named after a music instrument company.
Yeah.
Oh,
That's
I get it now.
that's the gimmick, right? Yeah.
It would help if they said the characters' names A in full or B at all.
That would be helpful.
Yeah. Gibson Rickenbacker and Fender Tremolo, Pearl Prophet.
I get it. Marshall Strat. Yeah, I got it now.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Very, very clever. Yeah. Natty Simmons, I believe, is also that.
Who is Natty Simmons in this movie?
What do you mean? It's the woman that's with him.
Is her name Natty?
Yeah.
They never say her name.
Deborah Richter. Oh, I don't know. I mean, look, I'm so used to nobody ever. I hardly ever write anyone's name down in my notes on these movies because if it's not shouted dramatically, then no one's name matters. But apparently,
I didn't even know JCVD's character's name until like 30 minutes in when we go to that bar at Bartertown.
Oh, I love Bartertown.
Yeah.
What a vision of the future this movie is.
I mean, you talked about them like leaning on Mad Max. Like, this is Mad Max at home, is what this is. This is Wish.com Mad Max.
It very
a little bit Warriors as well. I mean, but
they're kind of just like rolling up every. And this is not the only movie to do this. Post Mad Max, there were so many post-apocalyptic action movies because they were cheap, right? You could go out somewhere where there's open land or sort of like abandoned industrial buildings, and boom, you've got production value.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that was sort of the appeal.
Albert Pion even said like this kind of genre stuff, like cyborgs, post-apocalyptic stories, none of that really interested him as a filmmaker. The only reason he did this kind of stuff is because it was cheap and easy to make.
Well, having seen some of his work, cheap is definitely something that comes to mind when I think of Pion films.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. But there is something about that, like, that being a valued asset for a filmmaker. Being able to turn absolute trash into reasonably well constructed trash.
Because I want to talk about Pion for just a second here in that, because you're right, this is far from the only like post-apocalyptic action film he made. Gorgone, have you seen Omega Doom? Because we've almost done that a few times on the show.
Yeah,
with Rutger Hauer, which is very much this same kind of movie.
So I am familiar enough with Pune in that he destroyed my brain with his Captain America film that we covered previously on other podcasts,
and will be covered again on this show.
Why would you do that to yourself, John? But I don't think I have ever watched Omega Doom. No,
I have definitely seen Omega Doom because there was a period of time when I watched anything with Rutger Hauer in it.
What it was is Omega Doom, specifically that poster where his like face is like cropped off to either side.
Yeah,
that was a VHS I saw on the titular action shelf. In Blockbuster for years as just like, that's one of the videos you see on the shelf. It lives on that shelf. That's where it belongs. Not coming home with me. Never that.
That was a definitely like late night HBO or whatever. Like, oh, Rutger Hauer's a robot in a movie. I don't watch that. And I haven't seen it since.
A lot of those.
He did, yeah. Well, we've talked about Rutger Hauer for one of the most talented dudes. Boy, few slummed it harder. Jesus Christ. Because we watched that alien monster movie with him that weirdly isn't an Albert Pion movie, but really seems like, what was it, Split Second?
It really
felt like a Pion picture for sure.
On the Omega Doom IMDb page, most of the pictures it has for posters are the double and triple feature DVD box sets that Omega Doom came in. And one of them is just the strangest lineup of Johnny Mnemonic, Omega Doom, and Universal Soldier 2.
Universal Soldier 2? Wow. Can I say I kind of have a soft spot for Johnny Mnemonic? I kind of dig Johnny Mnemonic. Now, it doesn't make a ton of sense, but I kind of enjoy that movie. It's very insane. Anyway, the thing I want to talk about, though, is, he was not happy with how this turned out, obviously, because it got completely taken away from him. But he turns this into his own Cyborg franchise with his own mythology, Nemesis, which we've, has come up because there's a bunch of them, has come up before as potential action shelf stuff. And he makes Nemesis. What does he make? 5 Nemesis movies?
Nemesis 2 Nebula, Nemesis 3 Time Lapse, Nemesis 4 Death Angel, and
I want to
Cyborg Nemesis, The Dark Rift.
Okay, that's the one I want to get to, because in Cyborg Nemesis, he combines the Nemesis universe with this,
and there are several returning actors from this film. What?
Yes, this was that was originally, it was Cyborg Nemesis is a prequel to this movie. So basically, the Nemesis world gives way to the world of Cyborg eventually.
Right, because I came out of this film wanting to know, how did we get here? How did humanity get to this point? I'm glad he really explored that.
And apparently there's much more clues to that movie, its place in the canon, if you watch his director's cut of this movie. So it's so insane. Cyborg Nemesis, The Dark Rift, which was originally supposed to be called Cyborg, what was it? Cyborg: Rise of the Slingers, I think it was.
Okay, sure.
There is a Nemesis 5, but it has nothing to do with Albert Pyong.
Yeah, that happens a lot in this world for some reason.
Sure. But a lot of the same actors continue to be in that film.
Yeah, very, very strange. I don't understand exactly. But anyway, yeah, Cyborg: Rise of the Slingers, and then was changed to Cyborg Nemesis. So, what all to say, this stupid movie from 1989 has spawned a bunch of weird shit. Because we also talked about, Gorgone, you were talking about beforehand, there is a Cyborg 2 that is only loosely connected to this movie.
Yeah, in that like certain events are referenced and that's it. But it is notable only because it features a babyface Angelina Jolie.
Right, yeah, it's sort of most known for being one of the early movies in her career. So, all that to say, let's talk about Cyborg. I definitely have some notes, but I will say there's a lot of this is one of those movies, and this is very much like action shelf sci-fi that starts with like black screen and just this voiceover going, "The future," and I was like, "Whoa, okay, whoa, movie, whoa."
This movie wants so hard to have the same opening as Mad Max Fury Road, right? Like,
yeah,
the world is on fire.
Yeah. Yeah. Or at this point, too, even the Road Warrior kind of begins with that. It was like, the oil wars. You know, and just like this whole idea about like we are being dropped in. It is dark. It is serious. Get ready for this is a world gone mad.
And the thing that separates Cyborg from these other films, though, is that our opening narrator who is telling us that, like, okay, the world is on fire. The plague has killed everybody. There are still scientists out there working to fix the plague. But why would you want to do that? This world is great. And it turns out the guy giving our opening monologue is the villain.
Which I kind of like that. I mean, I think I'm going to come back to this a lot. There's a lot of stuff in this movie that is cool on paper. If I were to describe it to you, you'd go, I don't know, that sounds cool. It's like, well, see it executed, though. Like, you know, because it's just not... Yeah. There's so many things where I go like, hey, that's pretty cool. I mean, there's a knife boot in this movie. He's got a quad-barreled gun.
I loved the knife boot. That is the greatest. That is... Yeah. I'm sad there wasn't rocket-powered boots to give him rocket-powered kicks.
Well, that would be...
But
yeah.
The knife boot is the next best thing.
Knife boot is great, and he does do, like, he slashes a guy's throat with it, and you're like, yeah.
For a canon film, I was shocked we didn't have the knife boot jammed into somebody's neck and see, like, a gout of blood squirt.
Well, I think that might be in the director's cut.
For as much of a canon film as this is, it is also, like, weirdly restrained for a canon film.
Yeah.
To the point where, like, our main character actually covers up the female lead's breasts at one point.
That scene was hilarious.
It's trying so hard to be like
Jean-Claude.
We've talked about this. Right? Jean-Claude loves to be seen as like the no, I'm the sensitive action star, okay? I'm not like the other ones. Yeah. All right, I'm a good guy.
He's a lot more objectified in his movies than any of the females.
Were you as shocked as I was, Listman, though? No bun shot from him.
That is shocking.
We expect buns.
Yeah.
John, with his technical cat problems, as a regular mainstay on the action shelf.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, sorry, the producer's getting upset with us.
Well, he was equally upset that we didn't see Van Damme's buns in this thing. I'm sure we'll get plenty of...
We did see him do the splits. We did see the Van Damme splits. And this might be the best one ever.
It's so good.
I had one note on his splits in this movie. I wanted it to be revealed that he was upside down the whole time and just reaches down at the guy's head.
That would have been cool.
You're right. That would have been better.
But he still does stab a guy in the head while doing the splits, and that's what you. I mean, that's kill of the movie, right?
I
mean, there's a lot of killing in this movie. I mean, according to the IMDb, Van Damme kills 17 people in this movie. So,
yeah, I really like the dummy shot of the guy getting kicked down the middle of the construction.
We do
site.
love it. We do stan a dummy on this show. We love dummies.
Yes,
like
dummy work is some of my favorite.
seeing its legs and heads bounce off of the stairwell it's falling through the middle of was very good.
I enjoyed that immensely too, and I really feel like Canon excelled at dummy deaths. They love to use dummies in their movies, so and not just Chuck Norris. Hey. Yeah, so we do the performance of this guy. All right, this is Vincent Klein, who was a professional surfer.
He's got an interesting build as like an action bad guy, because you expect when somebody is like really ripped, you expect him to also be like wide. This guy's more like lithe. He's got like a Tarzan kind of build to him,
which I guess makes sense for the surfing. He does a lot of water, and this is his screen debut, and he will go on to be in many more films for Albert Pion, but also he pops into Point Break. He's in a legit action movie. Yeah. He's one of the surfers in Point Break because there's a lot of surfing in that movie.
He was also in an episode of The Adventures of Briscoe County Jr., a show I know we all enjoy.
Yes, and we talked about him actually a little while back. Listen, he does appear as one of the villains in Double Dragon.
He feels like a Double Dragon or Mortal Kombat bad guy, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Yes, definitely.
But the vast majority of his work is in the films of Albert Pion. He is one of his guys, and I can't tell if they dubbed him or just altered the voice. But either way,
I got the impression everybody was dubbed.
Yeah. This feels like an after the fact. We just recorded all the dialogue later.
There's no piece of dialogue in this film that is recorded on set.
No, it doesn't.
There's no way.
No, and
I think Albert Pion just didn't hire a sound guy.
Well, they did talk about one of the guys is played by a German guy they talk about his Ralph Moeller, amazing name.
Sounds German.
Had such a thick German accent that they had to dub his dialogue just for him to be understood saying the lines. He's the one who plays Brick Bardo.
I guess some lines.
I don't remember which one that is. He's one of the bad guys.
Names are mentioned.
Yeah. But
I think he's the guy who dies at the beginning of the movie trying to get the cyborg out of the city.
Oh, I think you might be right on that. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
But hold on. I was just scrolling through Albert Pion's IMDb page because I'm a masochist and seeing what movies will probably corrupt your lives in the future. And one is called Doll Man.
Oh, Doll Man.
It is a hard-boiled intergalactic policeman lands on Earth.
Love it already.
But because he is an alien, he is only 13 inches tall on our world.
My God. Okay, well I know what the next Pion movie we're doing is. Holy shit.
It is a 1991 film starring Tim Thomerson.
Yeah.
But his character's name is Brick Bardo.
He loved that so. Whoa, hey, Jackie Earle Haley's in that movie.
Yeah, no, it looks like a very strange film.
Well, that comes to us from Charles Band and the folks at what is it, Full Moon or is it Eclipse? No, Full Moon Entertainment, who we've covered a number of their movies over on Meet the Monsters because they're responsible for the Subspecies franchise. And I have to imagine this has something to do with the fact that they also make the Puppet Master movies. So maybe they're using some of the same technology there.
Yeah.
Man.
So I guess Albert P. Really likes Brick Bardo as a character.
Well, here it is. I'm looking on the trivia on Doll Man. Pion used the name Brick Bardo. He also used it for a minor antagonist in Cyborg, and also used it in another film he made called Radioactive Dreams. So 3 different movies have the name Brick Bardo in it. He's just like, I like how that sounds.
Sure. Okay.
Hey, man. Whatever.
The name isn't going to be mentioned in any of these films.
No.
It's there.
Lord, no. Doll Man must be covered, and we must make Meet the Monsters host Brendan Jones watch it with us.
I feel like there's a whole subgenre of monsters films that is little people in big world.
Yeah. And they're all made by Full Moon. entertainment. They cracked how to do that in 1990, and they've been getting away with it ever since.
Because then Toy Soldiers came out and completely changed
really
the game.
absolutely.
Yeah, so immediately the first note I have is just jumpsuits! ! Because we've got when we're seeing this guy escorting the cyborg at the beginning of the movie, they're both in like Buck Rogers rejected jumpsuits, or V. It kind of reminded me of the V jumpsuits.
All right.
Yeah.
I am going to look something up real quick. All right, so this movie does predate the Fallout video game franchise by a little while. The first Fallout game doesn't come out till 1997, but that was my first thought going into this film when we saw the jumpsuits was like, okay, these are the vault dwellers, and then the super mutants are chasing them.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, pretty much. You could say that maybe Todd Howard was inspired by this film for Fallout.
Well, I think it speaks...
Fallout's never been accused of being a wholly original property, but I think when it comes to post-apocalyptic storytelling.
I was gonna say though, I think it just speaks to like Mad Max, to this, to Fallout, to the 18 movies in between. Like there is just sort of this
universality.
Yeah, this sort of thing about like we have an agreed upon post-apocalyptic look for movies and pop culture, right? Like, immediately we're given so much information up top, and none of it will matter because it's all about this cyborg is transporting the information for the cure to this plague that is the reason why we're in a post-apocalypse.
The plague, who's like, what the plague does, we only see very, very briefly in one scene in Bartertown. I keep calling it Bartertown because that's a Mad Max thing.
That's what it's called.
Like,
yeah, I called it a blacksmith village because there was a lot of like hot metal and stuff around. Yeah, I don't know.
That's what the spark factories in the post-apocalypse become, is the last bastions of civilization.
And by the way, speaking of spark factories, this movie is just abandoned warehouse to abandoned factory to abandoned whatever. Like every single scene is just some abandoned industrial location.
John, do you know where this movie was filmed?
I believe I do. Oh yeah, or finally Swamp. Filmed on location in beautiful North Carolina.
Okay.
So it's actually where the movie takes place technically, because they're cutting them off at Charleston. I was gonna say the most unbelievable sets in this film are the ones that supposedly take place in New York at the beginning. It's like none of this feels like New York or the surrounding environment.
And they did shoot at a couple locations for some of the, I think the abandoned warehouses at the Titan Missile Museum in Green Valley, Arizona.
Okay. And obviously everything in the last segment of the movie in the quote-unquote Atlanta is on a soundstage.
Oh, sure. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah.
They just... I feel like Cannon had a standing burnt-out city set.
Oh, I mean, it's the one from the end of Masters of the Universe.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. It's just sort of like we have a city that can be in whatever state of disrepair you need it for. It's ready to scale up or down. Because I think I've seen I think we saw this same city set in Invasion USA too.
I believe so. And this set was going to be used for the Spider-Man. Never happened.
Yes, because when they were making Masters of the Universe, they were going to go right into Spider-Man, so they were building sets they could use in between movies. Once again, they were trying to be very so they were so ready to do Spider-Man that like the high school where the kids in Masters of the Universe go would have been Peter Parker's high school then.
Yeah,
always trying to save a buck.
Smart if you're also making good movies.
Well, and I've recommended both documentaries about Cannon. I highly recommend both Electric Boogaloo and the Go-Go Boys are both great. But in the Go-Go Boys specifically, I can't remember it's Golan or Globus is going like, in retrospect, maybe we should have made a couple less movies and put some more resources into the big ones. Like, maybe
instead of like making 15 movies at the same time.
Yeah, this sort of thing. It's like maybe we could have shaved off 2 movies off our slate and put some more money into our Superman movie instead of making it look like shit.
Look, it's the old Roman legionary tactic of you either go really wide or you go real deep, right? And they chose to go wide, and it didn't work out.
Well, because that's what I'm talking about. It's sort of like the thing where it's like they wanted to play with the, and we've covered like Cobra, we did, which is about as big as they got. But it's sort of like they wanted to play with the big boys, but still wanted to make movies like you make B movies, and that doesn't work because now you're making things that are supposed to be blockbusters, but are still done on the cheap, and that is Superman 4.
Yeah,
and we will next summer cover that with Ibrahim Mustafa, who will defend that movie
who loves that
to his
film.
death.
I mean, I am interested to hear what he has to say. I don't agree, but hey,
do you know that? Well, this is just a preview of that. Listman, you've never seen Superman 4, right?
No, but I have heard.
Why? But I said to Ibrahim, I said no. Michael's never seen Superman 4. He goes, okay, let me call him before he watches it. he wants to preface it.
Okay, can we record that conversation?
Please, yeah, I want to record that conversation because he just goes, there's some things he should know going in. All right.
I'm game. Yeah.
I want to see the movie that can be saved with a preface.
Well, and the thing, Gorgone, you know him well enough, and we had him talk about Superman movies in general on an old podcast we did. I've heard all of his arguments. I understand what he sees in that movie. I do agree it's not as egregious as Superman 3, but it's still really bad. Like, it's just the thing where it's like, I totally get what you're getting out of it. I'm not there with you, man.
Yeah.
I look at his opinion on Superman 4 the way I look at my opinion on, like, latter-day Godzilla films.
Sure.
Like, I can acknowledge that I'm getting something out of this that maybe broader audiences won't.
Right. But what are you getting out of Cyborg, to get back to this?
What I'm getting out of Cyborg is that we were talking about the main villain of this film, played by Vincent Klein.
Yeah.
Say what you will about the actual plot of this film. He is a striking looking human being.
Absolutely.
Sure. Yeah.
I'm assuming those are contacts to make his eyes like white.
They are.
They absolutely are. That was brought up in I have some trivia about that.
But he has got like the face of, like you said, a Mortal Kombat or a Street Fighter or a Streets of Rage, like side-scrolling bad guy. He's got the build and the face of a video game villain. And when he is in like kill everybody mode, he just has this expression where his mouth is always slightly open and he's making these sounds like an aggravated gorilla.
Here's Vincent Klein once recalled that because of the low budget of the film, that only 2 pairs of contact lenses were made for his character. He had lost the first pair in an unspecified early scene, and then later on while filming the final fight scene, he had thought he had lost the other one. Filming had to immediately stop while the crew tried to find them, which... Then he discovered the lenses had actually shifted up above his eyes from all the dirt, smoke, and high winds of the scene that were filmed, causing him to blink uncontrollably. By blinking again in his trailer, he was able to move the lenses back down and filming resumed. But could you just imagine the whole set of a film going like, "All right, stop! We got to find this contact lens."
And everybody's that was in the final sequence that they were filming?
Yeah.
So presumably that was in the, like, quote-unquote Atlanta where it was all windy and dirty.
Correct.
So the floor is just, like, up to ankle-deep water and you're looking for contact lenses?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and the fact that it was they were in his skull is so...
Yeah.
That makes me so uncomfortable. I hate that.
I mean, there's a reason I never got contact lenses to begin with. I've always just been creeped out by the idea. I've always just been like,
it's weird. You get used to it.
That's what everybody always says. Yeah, but it's like, it's just something so bizarre.
I'd rather have lasers shot at my face.
Actually,
exactly.
I have actually
That's
thought about
better.
the next step beyond glasses would be laser surgery. That's over and done with quick, and then I'm on my way. Also, we should talk about Jackson Rock Pinkney, who plays Titus, one of the guys. Anyway, he was permanent.
He has 3 credits in this movie, John.
Well, because all the bad. they talk about every bad guy who isn't the main bad guy plays every henchman in the movie.
Yeah.
But anyway, he was permanently blinded in one of his eyes due to an accident in the sword fight scene with Van Damme. Van Damme cut his eye and permanently blinded him.
And I'm sure
Yeah.
that Canon Film Group has paid for all of his medical bills, right?
Actually, it was Van Damme who ended up settling with him about that. Van
Which
Damme
I think is weird. I don't
himself.
know.
What it shouldn't be Van Damme's fault. Like that should be on the
No,
fight
it's
choreographer and
the
then ultimately the
production's fault.
studio. Yeah, it is interesting that it was ultimately Van Damme who ended up footing the bill for that.
I think that speaks to the fact that maybe Canon wouldn't, and Van Damme's a really good person.
Yeah,
Because
maybe.
he sued the production, and then it was Van Damme that settled.
I'm saying, I think
Yeah.
that was Van Damme being like, "Look, I blinded the guy. If you're not going to pay his bills, I will."
Yeah, yeah. And so once again, JCVD episodes are very different than Seagal episodes. Seagal would have been like, "I didn't fucking blind him." What is he
Seagal
talking
would have
about?"
gone back
He
for
would
his
be
other
bragging
eye.
about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what? I can offer him symmetry at the very least.
I gave
Yeah,
him
I blinded a man. I'm just so good at sword fighting.
That's what
I blinded
happens
him.
when you fight the master. You take the chances.
Yeah, he knew what he was signing up for.
except for
He was
that
going
one time when he got
toe-to-toe with me.
choked out and pooped himself.
Still the best tale of.
Allegedly.
Yeah, that's what people say they saw, but they didn't understand. It was a tactic.
Yeah.
I
If
pooped.
anything, he pooped himself.
No,
That's what
I
happened.
pooped myself on purpose as a tactic.
Yeah.
We're not talking about this movie at all.
No, we're always, as we frequently say, we're always about to talk about Seagal. And you know why? Because there's not much to talk about. I will say though, love that we see Van Damme's foot kick a guy before we see Van Damme's face.
The fact that he enters this movie from off shot via his foot made me so happy.
That say
It's
what
the best Van Damme entrance.
whatever else is in this movie that's terrible, it gave me that, and that filled me with joy. Oh my god, it's the best.
I will say, I don't watch the industrial strength treadmill of bullshit that the two of you do. So when I'm watching a film like Cyborg,
Yeah.
it is a strange recurrence in my media consumption as opposed to the regular mill that you all do.
We do talk about that. It's one of the reasons we like to have guests on the show from time to time, is because it's like, oh right, it's a novelty for you guys.
Right.
For us,
So when
it's
I was
life.
watching this film and watching like the first, I don't know, 15 minutes of it before I'd kind of figured out what the movie was, there were moments of like me smiling uncontrollably because this was just the sort of like, this is a canon movie, and I know all the hallmarks of that, of just like, okay, here's our main bad guy. He is a scary gargoyle of a man. He has a knife specifically for slitting throats.
Of course.
And Van Damme will enter the frame via his foot. Excellent.
One of the things I love about this bad guy is he is always introduced just standing while his henchmen run around him, which is always a great power bad guy move. He doesn't really like get involved until that final fight with Van Damme.
Yeah.
I mean, other than just enjoying the brutality of like the world that he's burning down, that's the bits of him we see before that final fight.
Yeah. So Van Damme saves the cyborg woman, who reveals she's a cyborg, and she's got the head that's all cyborgy once she takes the scarf off her head or whatever. Or does she have a wig?
She's a wig. Yeah.
Or her wig.
Yeah, she has a wig. Now here's the biggest thing to me when you talk about the cyborg. Why isn't it the cyborg that goes with him? Why do we then introduce another woman to be his like sidekick through the movie? Wouldn't the much cleaner, simpler storytelling thing to be he's escorting the cyborg through the world?
Yeah.
Again, John, the idea that this film needs to divorce itself from the title / the like primary high concept that it presents, I think is the biggest like problem with this film. Is that, okay, we introduce this idea of the cyborg. We introduce this idea that she has this data in her head that can help cure the plague that has brought humanity to its knees. she is then immediately excised from the rest of the film, barring two other
But it
scenes.
just seems like that is choosing to make the movie make less sense, right? Like it's
Yes,
it's
correct.
the easier thing to do would just be from this moment on he's now protecting the cyborg. Simple.
Because then you can engage with the high concept sci-fi-ness of this world on a more regular
And then
human basis.
keep everything else the same. This
Right.
is the guy who murdered his family, and that guy is the guy trying to get the cyborg. And I like the idea that he wants to stop the cyborg because he likes this world and doesn't want the regular world to come back. That's all good. It's just there is, when you talk about, you were talking about that earlier, Gorgone, which is right. Because there isn't any stakes or push and pull to the main journey, you don't care about anything. If I would care even just a little bit more, it would still be dumb, but like you would care a little bit more if it's like, oh no, Van Damme has to protect this cyborg woman or else. Instead, it's just like two people on the fringe of a movie. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Do you think you would also have to excise the whole backstory of one of these pirates being one of the kids?
Oh,
he
I
sort of
actually
raised, or...
like that. I actually think that should be a bigger part of the movie.
That's why this movie doesn't click, and like you don't understand the stakes of the film until the last 20 minutes when that reveal is like fully
revealed,
cemented.
Yeah, because I actually thought that was one of the most interesting turns in the movie. The problem is, the movie isn't interested in what that actually means, because specifically Van Damme said when he did the recut of it, and once again, I sincerely, I bet Pion's cut was impossible to watch, because this thing trying to be a more serious sci-fi movie was not going to make it better. They're just not.
Yeah.
I just don't see it there. But Van Damme was emphasize the fights and cut down the drama.
Yeah.
My only thought would be that if you make what's her name, Haley, his like surrogate daughter who then has joined the pirate gang,
Yeah.
if she becomes more of a primary like anti-hero in the film and she engages with the cyborg, then maybe there adds an interesting flavor to this, to the bits that already exist, as opposed to reworking the whole film.
Yeah, that could work too. I mean, they just give anything that grounds the cyborg in the plot more would help.
Right.
And anything that also keeps the stakes clear, because we're not actually following the cyborg.
The main character motivation.
Yeah, because Gibson Rickenbacker just sort of keeps meeting up with the cyborg. Because even here, my favorite moment is later in the movie when he does kind of agree to take her, and she's like, "No, you can't protect me. Bye."
Yeah,
that really
the
made
fact
me.
That the cyborg like doesn't the sci-fi conceit of this film swerves away from our hero as an active choice of the script is
Really
basically
funny.
the story of the movie going like, no, fuck you. That's not what this movie
I
is
will
about.
say-
It's not going to let you engage with it.
And definitely, this is where the $500,000 budget comes in. But I will say another problem with the movie is, and I knew this just watching the opening titles, you get like, okay, Jean-Claude Van Damme, and no one. There are no like there's usually like a canon movie will get like, I don't know, you get like a real, you'll get like a Henry Silva in there who can ground. If this movie needs like an old professor guy who's like a legendary actor, there's no one. Everyone in this movie is terrible. They're either stoic like the main bad guy, where it's great, that all you need to do is kind of just stand there, but like the woman is terrible. Natty,
So
she can't act.
there is briefly Joffrey C. Brown, who's like a working character actor through the like 60s and 70s and 80s, and he is the saloon guy in Bartertown who says like, I'd give this up if I were
You know
Gibbs.
what? Best
I thought
actor
you'd
in the
settle
movie.
down.
Best actor in the movie.
Yeah.
Right, but that's the part I expect
Yes.
to be like some A-list guy who we've seen in 1,000 things who was only in there for one scene.
Somebody
Instead, it's a stunt guy.
somebody who, that's what I'm talking about. There's that usually, because like, especially we love Van Damme, and Van Damme is actually better than most people in this movie. And this is a Van Damme who hasn't fully learned to act yet. But he actually still has something going on.
Well, I mean, he has his inherent just like charisma that made him eventually evolve into the movie star we know, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so, but there is something about like there's no one here to back him up and give him an emotional grounding. Everybody is just so forgettable. I do want to talk about, because eventually we do get to his tragic backstory. I do want to talk about his flashback wig.
His flashback wig is a mullet?
Yeah,
With bangs?
A mullet with bangs. That's key. That's because
with curtain bangs.
Yeah, he's got the. It's so clearly a wig. It's so clear, like this is the past. Stick this wig on.
I actually
it
thought
was actually a mop. I think they actually just removed a mop head and put it on him.
I mean, that's what it kind of feels like, where it's just like, we don't have any money for a hair department. Here, put this on. Now we'll shoot.
I think this film is one of the scenes that probably got cut. Is a very intimate and like coded as sexual haircutting scene between his found family's wife and him, because at a certain point in the flashbacks he loses the wig. So in every scene where he's putting away his knives, and the scene where he is doing the classic 80s move of man kisses woman's neck, woman collapses backwards in ecstasy from neck kisses. Well, he does not have the wig in either of those.
When it's Van Damme, though, I'm just saying.
Sure. Yes. The erogenous
and they did show
zone
that scene 3 times. So.
Well, I do love the moment when, as we talked about, the woman who's with him sort of offers herself up to him, and he says no, and instead he goes to sleep and has flashback sex. He has
flashback sex with Mary. Is that the woman played by Terry Batson? I think.
Sure. I think that's right.
Yeah, we don't know. Their names are never said, so we can't tell.
The names in this movie don't matter at all. That's why I keep saying the woman he's with. I see in the credits here her name is Natty, but like you're saying, I don't remember anybody saying
mentioned.
That. Deborah Richter.
She never introduces herself. She never asks what Van Damme's name is.
Nothing to this movie, right?
No. Well, from Canon's perspective, she adds
a whole lot.
A nude scene.
Yeah. And like you're saying, though, I will say it is oddly and weirdly post-apocalyptic. There's rapey vibes, but never any express rape in it, which is unusual for Canon.
So fucking I wonder if that would be in the original.
Yeah, it's probably in the X-rated cut.
That sounds like a Pune thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a scene in the boat as the pirates are traveling south, in which we see at least one woman naked on their ship.
Yes.
Like looking out in like daze, like she's been ravaged or raped in some way, and it's like, so it's implied but it's never shown on screen, which I appreciated. I will say the whole nude scene with Natty in this film is really to actually swerve away from that and establish that Van Damme is never going to take advantage of this person, and that's her purpose in the story, is to establish that Van Damme is the cure to the world, as is said in the final line of this film.
Well, you do get a real Blake Snyder would greatly approve. You do get a save the cat moment when he's in aforementioned Barter Town, as we're pulling from Mad Max. When you have the douchebag, like, just thug guy steal the little kid's ball, and then Van Damme punches him out and gives the kid back his ball. And I just went,
so unnecessary.
I think he punched him out. It was off camera, so you don't actually see him punch the guy out, but it is heavily implied.
There's a distinct whoosh, and then suddenly he comes back with the ball. But I did write down, and Van Damme saves the cat.
Yeah. Well, no, because his first save the cat moment is when he saves Natty from the burnt out village, right?
Yeah, I guess that's true.
And he stays with her after he admittedly knocks her unconscious.
Well, Van Damme likes to have 5 to 6 save the cat moments in his movies.
Sure. Yes, yeah.
We've talked about this. He loves. I've seen it 80 times. I just can't get enough of cats.
I wish I could have been in the film. I would have loved to be in there.
Jean-Claude Van Damme auditioning for cats.
For the railway cat.
Yeah. This
Ron
is for
from Tucker.
Mr. Mustopheles. But so yeah, we do talk about this. Van Damme, both Van Damme and Norris, both are the guys who it's very important to them that they not only be badass, but they also be like, yeah, we're also just the best guy ever.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yes.
something Steven Seagal has never cared about in life or on film. But I'm saying well, and not just him, but like other action stars want to be like stoic men of, you know, badassdom. But to Van Damme and Norris, it's like, no, it's important. I like care about kids and treat the neighborhood well. And, you know, they love that.
And
shit.
Van Damme portrays that better than Norris.
Well, because he's got a little bit more. We love Norris. He is our favorite block of wood.
Yes.
But he is a block of wood.
Yes.
And block of woods don't ask for consent; they are just acted upon. Whereas Van Damme is apparently looking for consent, and that's important to him.
It is, yeah. It's like no.
Yeah.
I'm just looking through here because, like I said, there's not too much.
The main plot of the film is bad guy kidnaps Cyborg. Bad guy is taking Cyborg to Atlanta regardless of situation. I don't fully understand the bad guy's plan in this film.
Get the cure and use the cure as a leverage to...
because that's the thing is the Cyborg is trying to get to Atlanta, I guess presumably because the Center for Disease Control is still there.
I guess, or has become the last bastion of science. In the United States.
It's very Last of Us, yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like, and she's got the information for the cure in her head, which, by the way, halfway through the movie, when it just decides to flash back to what happened there, that also threw me. Like, it's just halfway through the movie, they go, "Oh wait, let's show how the Cyborg got the cure."
Oh yeah, they did.
Well.
That.
They don't show how she got the cure. They show how she became a cyborg.
And they put the cure in her head.
Yes, that's
That's the thing, right?
No, because she traveled to New York to get the information they needed.
All right, well, that makes even less. So,
because her and the guy who died at the beginning of the film, when they're in New York and running into Fender's territory, is because they went to New York to get the information that the people in Atlanta needed to make the cure. She has secured that information in her matrix brain and is now trying to come back to Atlanta. Fender is told all of this because she just admits it to him.
Yep. Oh, we've got no time.
And he says, well, I'll take you to Atlanta, and then once I have a cure, I'll be a god, which is just movie bad guy gobbledygook for... I will have control over the thing.
There's a couple times in this movie when he talks about being a god. And you're just like, okay, yeah, sure, man.
There's some like actually interesting religious allegories in this film in terms of people A, being crucified, and B, coming back from the dead. Achieving godhood.
Exactly, but as you bring it up, because it's like, but the religious allegory ends there, where it's just like, see, Christian imagery, and you're like, okay, but what is it?
Yeah,
was it?
Sure.
Was it mean?
I shouldn't have used the word allegory. I should have used the word illusion. I guess.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, but it's just like, because it's this kind of this whole movie, right? Where you go like, okay, you're using Christian imagery. What's the next step? No, okay, you're just gonna crucify. Okay, it's just because that's a thing.
Okay, great.
All right, got it. Yeah, it's all just the like illusion of a movie.
John, this is a deeper film about the redemption of man. Okay, it's the redemption of human beings, removing the shackles of sin.
You know what? I'm sure how Pion talked about it too.
The movie that this reminds me the most of is The Last Temptation of Christ.
Did you guys see, by the way, Scorsese says he's going to make another Jesus movie?
Oh boy, God bless him.
Just announced.
Is it a sequel?
I don't know what it is, but he just announced he will be making another movie about the Christ. So I'm sure that won't cause any more problems than it did back then. It's time to revisit that. So long as we get Willem Dafoe back, that's all I care about. Oh yeah, older than Jesus ever got to be, and it's Willem Dafoe, and he's back, baby. Can we talk about some of the action in this movie, just because this is an action podcast?
Yeah.
We do get a.
yeah. Huh.
I mean, the action is pretty good. I mean, I agree with some of the they repeat some of this, but yeah, of course, Van Damme, as we've always said, kicks people better than maybe anybody has ever kicked people on screen.
Very cinematic presence in an action film.
The part I laughed the most at is in the final fight with Fender when he keeps trying to spin kick him and failing. It happens like 6
first you don't
times.
succeed, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the fact that he has to do this whole roundhouse build-up to spin kick him, and it keeps not working. It's just like, you'd think after the second failed spin kick, we'd give up on this strategy when you just hit this meat trunk of a man.
I also like in that final fight the part where Van Damme has already been beaten badly and he's in this burnt-out car, and then Fender is walking at the cyborg or whatever, and Van Damme is just like,
And
no.
shoots Natty, right?
Yes. And Van Damme is like, no, and he just kicks his foot out the window of the car and connects with him, his side, and knocks. I thought that was hilarious.
His foot goes about 6 feet farther than it should to connect with Fender.
Yeah, it is.
That happens a lot in Van Damme films.
It does. There's also that point when he hangs off of the. He's hanging off of the railing, that factory, and he grabs onto a pipe that breaks. But then you clearly see the pipe turn into a rope or a cable, so he can. Because I'm like, just a hardened pipe
Just to swing down and kick someone
is not gonna swing like a rope, but suddenly it just turns into a rope that they've painted silver, so he can do an Errol Flynn. I greatly enjoyed that. Did you guys like his redesigned paintball gun? I
didn't know what was going on with that thing, because it's like a 4-chamber gun that he has to manually rotate the chamber for. Yeah. But when he reloads it, it's like a break action thing where he takes a set of cylinders out of the center and reloads it.
It's a Tipman SMG-60 paintball gun. And what you're seeing him take out of it is a 9-ounce CO2 bottle.
Oh,
yeah.
Fascinating.
So it literally just dissipates. It's another thing in this movie that's cool in concept. I like the idea of having to manually rotate the barrel. That's cool. But
one of my favorite conceits in post-apocalyptic sci-fi, and you see this in Fallout, you see this in other things, is that okay, so the world fell apart. We can presume that social norms are breaking down, and certain societal infrastructures have stopped working, like electricity. Okay, fine, totally makes sense.
Right.
People stopped manning the electrical grid, it stops working. Right. Internet doesn't work, obviously. Yep. Roads aren't being maintained, great. Why would the guns have disappeared?
Yeah, they're just gone.
There could be an explanation, the government or whatever replaced the current government, went and tried to just either destroy all the guns or have all of them.
Oh, so it's a Bunraku situation.
Yeah, exactly.
That movie's come up as a potential action shelf.
It's so weird, and I love it so much.
Yeah, Bunraku is an insane movie. I remember that show. Revolution, where all the power went out, and there was some conceit in there about why guns weren't a thing. I can't remember what it was. There was something.
Didn't gunpowder stop working or something? It was they couldn't cause the spark to make bullets fire off.
It was something like that, because I remember they doing some conceit about why everybody had swords beyond. Isn't it just cooler if everyone has swords?
Sure.
It is, yeah.
And then that Apple TV show C, at least the world is blind, so guns stop making sense.
Right, yeah. Okay. Guns are no longer really an effective weapon. Right, yeah. It's sort of because you can't really use them. Yeah. So I think, but no, this... but then... Yeah, there really aren't any other guns in this movie, are there? He kind of has the only gun.
Rick. No. Fender Tremolo has a gun.
Oh, does he? What?
He has a bigger, more cylinders version of the
That's
one
right.
That
That's right. He does.
Yes.
But it's still it's not the guns don't exist. There are very few, and they're very specific, weird future guns.
Yes.
Like did everybody have to make their own guns? Is that the idea? Like that's almost what it feels like to me. Is just like we had to build these guns.
I can accept in like a Mad Max situation where, okay, we're so far into the apocalypse at this point that bullets have become a scarcity, but there's still plenty of guns around.
And that's actually something. I mean, that's something I do like in the Mad Max movies, like in Fury Road when he has the double barrel and he just has the one shell in it. You know,
right. But in this movie where they're just like, no, all the guns have vanished somehow, is something we kind of have to buy into.
Well, this part of that disease also affected bullets. You know, the plague extends to bullets as well. I love how much this. You don't have to get. I mean, Mad Max is also very much like oil wars and whatnot, and just kind of, you know, you got it right. But just how little they give a shit about this plague is hilarious in this movie.
Yes.
We get one scene in Bartertown where they're passing a plague victim who's being like got boils all over their face or something. Yeah. And Natty takes that moment to be like, yeah, the plague's affecting nobody. Why would you want to cure that? Huh, Van Damme? You should care about the plot.
Well, that's the thing is sort of like, so the plague has obviously killed a ton of people, but we're to assume like Van Damme and most of the main characters are just immune by just circumstance. Like nobody seems worried about getting the plague in this movie.
Well, we don't know how it's, you know.
Right, that's what. Yeah, which further as
we also don't know how long it's been since the plague happened. Yeah. Like we have no clear timeline about when this takes place.
No. And then the biggest question I have, guys, what is a slinger?
A person who can sling knives real good.
I mean, sure. That's not Pion's explanation, but yeah, sure.
But that's the explanation the movie gives us, because literally when he's talking to the bar guy at Bartertown, he talks about hanging up his knives, so the knives are a part of it.
Yeah.
So is it a specific organization, or is it just like
someone who slings knives real good?
According to Pion, it is.
He's wrong. I don't care what he says.
It's basically it's basically just a mercenary, right? Like Pion talks about, that's sort of become.
Sure.
It is a soldier for hire if you need. I mean, it is sort of going back to the Old West,
and that's
right?
Inherently different from the pirates, I guess. Like,
well,
the gunslinger's different than a bandit, or
well, the idea is basically like I think in sort of the Old West parlance, it is like a gunslinger that if you're traveling somewhere, you would hire a slinger to protect you from the bandits and pirates.
It's this version. Right. It's this movie's word for Ronin, or wandering soldier of fortune, or mercenary, or whatever.
Yes, that is. I mean, that is exactly what this movie is sort of posing him to be.
Right, yeah. But the fact that we have no other slingers to compare Van Damme to means I think he throws knives good.
Is he the last of the slingers? Is he the final slinger? You know, they've gone extinct.
Well, the thing that's hilarious, it is sort of like when you talk about the Blade Runner, right? Like, it's very clear what a Blade Runner is in that movie. Where here, they say slinger so much, and yet, as you bring up, no, we never meet any other slingers. We don't know how he compares to them or anything. So it's almost just like, why even create a term? Like, what does it matter?
Actually, I do have one quick question, John. Maybe you can help me with this.
Yeah.
Why are they called Blade Runners?
It sounded cool.
Yep. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, I swear, Hampton Fancher.
That's what it comes down to, right? Is they sound cool.
Hampton Fancher, who wrote the movie Blade Runner, talked about there was no term for them in the novel, and he wanted to come up with something that sounded good, and so it just was. It really, there's no explanation in the world of Blade Runner as to why they're called that. It just sounds cool as hell.
Yeah,
and it does.
And that's why we have slingers.
Yeah, I mean, that is kind of why we have slingers in this. And according to this, Pion fought hard to call the movie Slinger, but Golden Globe has said no one will know what that is, so we call it Cyborg.
We still don't know what it is.
I mean, they're not wrong in that people would be like, Slinger, what? But also calling it Cyborg, as we've talked about, is also a weird choice.
Especially considering the timeline of, like, the etymology of that word, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's honestly a pretty recent introduction into the like canon of terminology we can use to describe post-human individuals. I believe the actual like word cyborg didn't start getting used until like fairly late in the 20th century. Like the things that were cyborgs were described in fiction beforehand.
Sure.
But using the actual term cyborg wasn't done until the 1960s.
Oh wow.
Okay, yeah. I mean, but I also think, once again, we've talked about they want to use it they want to try to make this seem like a Terminator movie. So they're using something that is vaguely in the parlance of robotics, right? I think that's why they called it that. It's just like, oh, that says killer robot movie, even though that's not what this is.
Right.
You know, I mean, so I do think it's some false advertising, really. I mean, it is sort of like, if you went into this movie as somebody who really digs sci-fi, I'm not sure it's going to deliver on that front exactly.
Yeah. What is interesting? What I find interesting about like the similarity between the slinger archetype and like the wandering Ronin and that kind of thing is Albert Pionne actually got started. I think he worked on a Kurosawa film. I was reading.
That could be. I actually don't know a lot.
So he worked with like the DP for a Kurosawa film. So that could be.
I see what you're saying.
Where he got his start.
Storytelling is.
Pionne found himself working on a Toshiro Mifune, who was the Kurosawa's main leading man. Worked on a TV series he did under the tutelage of Kurosawa's director of photography, Takao Saito. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, who shot
Pionne
things
has
like
this
High
really
and Low and
interesting,
Redbeard.
Like being associated with these really, really talented filmmakers. And
interesting
legendary.
pedigree that he really didn't put to any like triumphant use.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's so he's such a strange, like, I find him more interesting.
Well, I'm looking at, I mean, of course, his debut feature was Sword and the Sorcerer, which we've already talked about. We're going to do at some point later on. And then after that, which did pretty well, he tried really hard to do Total Recall. That was like his big dream project, was to do...
Thank God that movie went to Verhoeven.
I mean, yeah, it certainly would have been wildly different. Although he was looking to cast William Hurt in the lead at the time, which would have been a much different movie.
Now that I think about it, Albert Pionne is like, he's trying so hard to be Verhoeven, right?
Yeah.
Like, it really does feel like he's striving towards that and never quite grasping the level of insane artistry that Verhoeven really tips everything over the edge, and that's sort of the point with his gonzo out there storytelling.
Absolutely. He's Verhoeven is sort of this like, he's exactly. He's like purposely over the top to make a point. Like it's so baked into his thing. It's like the more insane I push this, the more actually this will land. And Pionne is this weird, like, it almost feels like he needs to push it further. Yeah, it is almost like this movie is also so self-serious in a way that even the Mad Max movies...
it has those absurdist elements. It has those absurdist elements and like crazy ideas and all sorts, but there's none of that like central focus, like, central conceit to
well, I also think it's just missing the one of the things that works about George Miller, obviously, in his Mad Max movies, is there is such a weirdness to the world that it actually feels more real. Like every character you meet in the world of Mad Max is so fully realized, whereas here everyone is just a sketch. Like nobody feels like they're grounded in anything.
Well, because Miller does build the world, and whether or not he tells the audience is not the point. But it makes sense in his head when he's constructing it.
Right? Yeah, and so you can. It's something we've talked about a lot in like genre fiction or any kind of world building stuff. Is there is this line between like, you need to know enough that I can see the world. I don't know if you guys have watched any of Silo on Apple TV, which I'm loving right now.
I've been meaning to. That sounds really.
It's so
up my
good,
alley.
but there's so much in it where it's just like, oh man, you feel like everything in every shot has been discussed by everyone involved. And even though the show isn't telling you like, well, look at this couch, it's part of this world, you just go like, man, that just feels like it's part of this world. And that's the thing in this movie is it does kind of feel like the way it was made, where it's like, I don't know, we got some chainmail lying around from Masters of the Universe, we can shoot over there in that warehouse, we know where there's a swamp to shoot a fight scene at, you know. It doesn't feel like this world was built out of, you know, anything. It's just sort of going like, what can we use to make a post-apocalypse?
So I think the best example of that, and we've talked about this scene, or at least that it exists a couple of times, is the bit where he gets crucified, right? That is so emblematic of the fact that this movie is a hodgepodge of things and ideas that are trying to say something, but what they're trying to say is muddied by the fact that they're just using secondhand pieces in that that boat that he is crucified on, which let us remove the fact that in the fight scene that happens in the swamp beforehand, we see the boat that he gets crucified on in the background, and that mast that he is eventually crucified on is standing.
Yep.
And it is part of, it is not a sailboat, it appears to be some kind of trawler or something. So it is not a mast that could be easily lowered, and yet somehow they managed to get him 30 feet up and crucified on there. Don't ask me how that actually happens. We just cut to
I'm
it.
pretty sure it's like Tears of the Kingdom. I'm pretty sure it's like the Korok.
You just ultra hand him up there and glue him to it.
Yeah, just stick him on there. Yeah, exactly.
That boat is in the background of that fight scene, and I have a distinct feeling that the set designers did not build that boat. That was just there in these like weird marsh flats somewhere in, where did you say it was? North Carolina?
Yes, North Carolina.
So some set director found that when they were location scouting, and they're like, ooh, that's cool, let's do something here. And they did. But what that has to do with the plague and the whole post-apocalyptic vibe of this film, it's not cohesive in any way. It's just a mishmash of pieces that they try to make sense fitting them together, and it doesn't.
Well, and I think that even that's the thing about when they crucify him. You're like, okay, we're adding this Christ imagery to Gibson Rickenbacker, but why? Like, he's in no way a Christ figure. They don't do anything. I'm not even sure he has any character arc in this movie.
Well, the lesson I took away from it was that if Jesus had just gotten angry enough to kick the cross over, he could have single-handedly beat up the Roman Empire.
I have to say, I do, once again, like a lot of stuff in this movie, Van Damme just kicking the cross apart, cool. That's a cool way to escape being crucified. But what the fuck? It doesn't mean anything. It's just throwing notable imagery on top of it.
John. Just like how Jesus Christ was killed and then was reborn and rose from the dead, like as he was reborn to become the cure to the world's failed.
While he's crucified, we get the sequence of how Fender killed his surrogate family before, which was in fact a baptism for him because he was dropped in a well. Look, it all tracks.
Except for
it all adds up. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, like, on like a visual level, but like he doesn't seem to be a different guy from when the family hires him to being with the family to coming out of that well to being crucified. Like, he's just the same guy. Shit just keeps happening to him. Because
John, you just have to read into Jean-Claude Van Damme's Vacant Stares. I think if you can look.
Can I say I found one quote about Van Damme about this movie that was just simply, I didn't like that movie. That was it.
Yeah, I can tell.
It's not good.
It's not. Yeah.
You've said before that, like, this is earlier in Van Damme's career, so he's not quite gotten to the point where he knows what he can accomplish as an actor.
They are just sticking him in stuff. He's a canon guy. Right. They're just going like, we're making this movie Cyborg. You'll be in it, Jean-Claude.
Yeah.
He didn't
on
write
paper,
this one,
I think the arc is, okay, mercenary, hard-boiled guy, softens because he gets in too deep with a family, family is killed. That makes him retreat back to his like soulless ways.
Yeah.
And then he has to reconcile the fact that his quest for revenge is because of that love that he felt and trying to reintegrate those pieces of his personality.
Dude, you're
right?
describing
But this
a
movie
totally...
doesn't really want to have anything to do with that sort of introspection.
No, because that's sort of what the Mad Max arc is, right? Mad Max was a guy, if you watch across the 4 movies, Mad Max was a guy who had a family. He was a cop. He was sort of an upstanding citizen. This gang murders his family. He becomes Mad Max. And then over the course of the movies, this guy who is trying to be like a loner badass keeps being drawn to helping people. You know, right? And that's sort of. I mean, and it's very simple because Max has to carry from movie to movie to movie, so he can't ever change too much. But just this idea that like it's sort of Wolverine is like that too, right? Where it's like it's a classic thing of I'm just a loner, I don't give a shit about anybody, but god damn it, I'll save this town full of orphans or whatever, right? Like,
but also I'll be the mentor for a teenage girl like 6 times.
But that's the thing is like, so there could have been something in this movie about how like I was a badass, then like you're talking about, then I opened my heart. And now I've closed it off again, but oh wait, actually I can be the hero again by embracing love again. But none of that matters. And even the daughter who was taken and becomes part of the cult or whatever, she has sort of a turn at the end of the movie, but it doesn't have much impact. She's just like, please don't kill Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Yeah, again, I think if there was a version of this movie in which she was our secondary protagonist and we followed her and her adventures with Fender and the Cyborg.
That's the thing. The reveal of that should have been earlier in the movie. And then we could have actually followed her wrestling with, like, oh no, I'm seeing... Because also, the thing we don't get is, like, I think she's to assume he's dead, right? Up until she sees him again.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah. So also then it's sort of like, well, I'm just kind of a nihilist. And then if seeing Van Damme again, like, opened up something for her, then, you know, that's that could have turned into an arc for that character. I'm like, that's the problem with this movie. It's such a blank slate of ideas. It's all just like concepts. So we could spin a decent movie out of almost anything that is presented here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because none of it has
just not
any
able to
actual...
pick one thing and stick with it.
Yeah, there's no depth, anything. It's all just like the beginnings of arcs, and then it just kind of the movie just kind of trails off. Even the end of the movie is the very end of the movie is the cyborg gets to Atlanta and they're gonna make the cure. But you're like, wait, was that really what the movie was about?
No, because the movie wasn't about anything. Because, like you said, it couldn't pick any one thing that it was about, so it wasn't about anything.
But this is the second movie we've seen. This is the second movie in as many weeks where a villain is killed on a hook in an industrial setting. So, because that also happens in Kickboxer.
I don't believe Fender is dead, but yes.
Well, I was waiting for him to come back again.
Rule of three, I'm saying, yeah.
I just love the idea of he just keeps coming back.
Well, that's the thing. At a certain point during that last fight sequence, I thought it was like, okay, so the Frankenstein monster. He can't die unless there's a burning windmill involved.
Yeah. And if you recall, even then he didn't die.
Yeah. Well, it depends on the canon. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man.
I choose to believe a la Van Helsing that he's living below that.
Well, that's what Bride of Frankenstein opens with, him being below the thing as well.
Yeah. The fact that we see him stabbed in the chest, like presumably in the heart, fall over, his eyes are open, his mouth agape, he is dead. Yeah. And then he comes back and fights Van Damme some more.
Yeah, very silly. Oh man, you can't stop me, Van Damme.
Yeah, it is a pretty brutal fight between the two of them in those like rainy Atlanta streets.
It's not bad. I mean, like I said, when it comes down to it, like, and once again, all this was forced on Pion, who didn't envision a movie with any martial arts in it originally. So it was a sci-fi drama.
What is this film without any martial arts? Is it just Children of Men?
Yeah, I think Pion Pion seemed to want. He's like, he really wants to tell this like gut-wrenching emotional story about a world gone mad. And then, of course, he makes it at canon to go, and there will also be lots of kicking, and if we could get some boobs in there, and...
Yeah, he wanted to do Cormac McCarthy's The Road, but ended up getting something closer to Roadhouse.
Well, that's what happens when you get Golan and Globus involved. I do kind of... So I'm as always, we're fascinated by Pion. And his second film, Radioactive Dreams, I think is a future episode of the show, because it's a post-apocalyptic detective noir.
Okay.
I mean, I like those words all put together.
Well, and much like the names in this, all of the names of characters in that are combinations of famous detectives and their authors. Philip Chandler, Marlowe Hammer, Rusty Mars, Miles Archer, Dash Hammer, Spade Chandler, Brick Bardo. Once again, that's another one he used that in.
I don't remember that famous
What
detective,
are your
Brick
all's
Bardo.
opinions on those sorts of illusions? Because I appreciate them when they're done every once in a while, but literally making every character in your movie that sort of reference is
makes me
irritating.
think he's sitting in a room looking at the objects in that room and like, I don't know.
This is just the end of it's just
Gibson
the end of,
Rickenbacher. I don't know.
I was gonna say it's just the end of Usual Suspects when he's like, "Oh my God, everything was in the room the whole time."
Yeah, exactly.
It's no. I think it's just one of those things where it should be done carefully and with consideration as to why you're doing it. I think that's the thing about Pion, and I can't tell. I know this got away from him or whatever, but I think he's a guy maybe who's like a lot of filmmakers we see on the action shelf and just across the board and like lower budget stuff is like, I think he saw himself as a guy who's like, no, I want to make deep movies, but he was just in the B movie genre. Like, it's just like you just didn't have the talent really to do it. So it's sort of like, I want to be this insightful maker of bold science fiction content, but it's something we also talk about over on Meet the Monsters as well, where it's like these guys who go, no, I want to tell a gut-wrenching story about a monster inside, but also I just can't resist the urge to fill it with blood and exploitation imagery, right? Like, it's just it's this weird dichotomy where it's like I want to have it both ways. And there are people who can pull that off. I think Sam Raimi's a guy who does that exceptionally well. But he's I think there's inherent talent there. And Pion got a couple shots at bat and bobbled it. Like, it just didn't, I think very creative guy, obviously. He created these whole worlds and stuff like that. But I also think that's something as well is we've talked about this in bad genre stuff. He really got caught up in creating the worlds and forgot to ever care about character or emotions.
Yeah, there's not a lot of characters.
The interesting experience I had last night when I was watching this film was as a palate cleanser. Usually after I watch an action shelf movie, I'll watch something short immediately after to just like refresh my brain, and so I'm not lingering on drift off to sleep.
That's a good idea.
I watched an episode of Garth Marenghi's Dark Place, and it is weirdly of a piece because Dark Place is making fun of these sorts of like low budget genre experiments, right?
Yes. And I feel like that Garth Marenghi is one of those guys who's overstating, like, or really is thinks he's writing deep introspective stuff, but it's schlock.
Right.
And those people, I applaud them for that, but there is something they kind of make me sad because it's like, oh, you can't see the limitations. I mean, the idea that he even would go back and recut this movie and think that there's like, no, somewhere in here is this vision. And then to also hear, but his recut also has way more gore in it and stuff like that. And you're like, I'm not sure that's what was missing here, man.
Yeah.
If only we had really seen a lot more of that massacre of the
viscera.
village. Yeah. If only we saw. If only we saw people's guts wrung out, then maybe then we would have gotten what he was saying with this.
I mean, I don't want to get too political on this show, but like self-introspection being absent in human beings, I think, is the root cause of a lot of divisions in society in general. But...
Sure. I mean, that is sort of a problem, right? Is there's this like it's just like, yeah, I'm not people who see other things, and I always talk about this whenever you see people try to replicate other filmmakers and stuff. It's just like, yeah, but you've got the surface of it, but you don't really understand why it's working. I see what George Miller's doing in Mad Max, so I'll just make a movie that looks like that. It's like, yeah, but you're missing like what actually makes Mad Max. Because we could do a whole month of just the Mad Max ripoffs on this show. I don't know that we should.
A month? You could
Probably
do like a year.
Yeah, I'm saying like, because there's so many, but the thing is, none of them have had the lifespan of Mad Max, because none of them connected the way that those movies did. None of them are really, the creativity isn't there. It's just going like, oh great, desert, cars, weird armor, got it.
It's so wild to me that George Miller made those 3 movies back to back and then took 20 years off to make some Penguin stuff and Babe Pig in the City, only to come back and make like a masterpiece.
Yeah.
I mean, and he was always thinking about it for those 20 years. He's really, really letting that percolate, which is, I think, interesting.
Yeah. And he almost made it justice.
He was waiting until technology could catch up with his insane ideas.
That is
the Warrior wasn't ready until 2012.
Just not there yet. We did some tests in the late 90s. He didn't look right.
Yeah.
Well, wasn't that a thing? Like he was trying for so long to make that 4th one, and at a certain point, he was just like, "Fuck it, I'm going to do it in an animated movie."
Yeah, well, he was gonna. Yeah, he was gonna do it as animated. He was gonna do it as a comic book at one point. There's all kinds of material that was created over the years, and I think you can see that in like the art book of the movie. Like so much that they talked about, like before there was even a script for that movie, there were so many of the images that end up in it based on other. Because it wasn't always literally Fury Road. It was always just the Mad Max 4. And different pieces of it kind of eventually came together in that movie, which is kind of why it's like people really want another Mad Max movie, and I would too. But it is kind of like, I don't know, man. What's so great about Fury Road is like that came out of not a purposeful 20 years of, but like it just came out of like, well, we just kept coming up with amazing ideas until this like perfect movie existed. So I don't know. We'll see. Furiosa's coming out, I think, next year, so. We'll see if that's...
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah.
My point with that was, as opposed to the films like Cyborg we get, where you have a filmmaker and a creator who's clearly really engaged with the ideas they're making in the same way that George Miller. Like, they're really fixated on this world they're building and the stories they can tell in it. But there is this strange gap in capability that we can call it talent, we can call it like production levels, like how they saddle themselves with production companies. Like obviously, if you're making a film at Canon, saying you want to create a gripping sci-fi drama, you've already handicapped yourself.
I mean, that's something that comes up on the show a lot, right? It's sort of like the best way to make an action shelf movie is to acknowledge you're making an action shelf movie. Don't, keep the vision small, keep it intense, keep it on things you can work on the fight choreography, because you don't focused. Like think about what it is, because oftentimes where these movies suffer is when they pretend they're bigger than they are.
So when you talk about an Albert Pyun, are you looking at a man who just can't grasp the fact that the world isn't transforming around him to encapsulate his vision? Is he so self-absorbed with what he's creating that he can't accept that everyone else isn't on the same page as him? Or is he just somebody who is trying to work within a system and doing the best he can and not being satisfied with the results?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's unclear. I think it's probably column A, column B, right? Like it's probably a little bit of both. You got to wonder when he's like decades into the career, though. That's where I start to wonder about this. It's just like, okay, I've made like 15 things and they're all of the same quality.
Yeah.
But I'm just gonna plow ahead. That's when it starts to lose the like, well, I'm trying my best, but the system is like, yeah, but at a certain point, man, you're like a schlock sci-fi director. And when you're making Nemesis 4, like, and that's great, man. He realized his vision or whatever, but like, you've got to know Nemesis is what it is, and that's fine.
Right.
That's the thing that gets me.
And there are people that really enjoy those films, you know, like people like,
of course,
schlocky
they
sci-fi.
wouldn't, they wouldn't have made them obviously if they didn't have some kind of fan base. But yeah, there is just something where it is just sort of, whenever I've seen interviews with him, it always seemed like he was just like, oh man, but you should have seen the vision I had, and it's just like, well, that's great. I think one of the best examples of that sort of director, of like guys who are trying to grip with the system but just like have this vision in their head, is Terry Gilliam, right? Yeah. He's a director who is like so clearly has a vision for things, to the point where he can destroy relationships with both studios and actors and the world at large, trying to come to grips with that vision. But and when it works, God, is it singing? And sometimes it can be Don Quixote. Well, that's the
literally
thing.
And
well, and that's the thing. That's the thing about a Gilliam, right? Is Gilliam
running at a windmill?
Gilliam wouldn't take a deal with Canon, right? It's sort of like he won't compromise. And so that could mean he's going to make a genius thing, or he could make something that never gets finished, because he won't make the compromised version of it. And Pion did, and you know. But I think that at a certain point, it's sort of like, yeah, when you've made enough of these, dude, you've compromised enough to know this is the life you're in. I mean, like, we'll get to that Captain America movie, but you're telling me, man, you're like, yeah, that was the Captain America I wanted to put out.
Yeah, Red Skull's gonna be Italian and fucking rubber suit.
Oh man,
it's so bad. It's so bad.
It's very bad. It's a very bad movie.
Does Pion talk about all of his films being not like they were compromised?
A lot of them, yeah.
Like
that's a frequent comment. Is, oh, if only you had seen the if only they had let me shoot the first draft. If only they had released my cut.
I see this sort of behavior of like in a lot of different elements, a lot of different things. Like, oh, if I was able to do it the way I wanted, then it would have been perfect. The only reason it's not good is because other people interfered, you know. So that does indicate a level of not being able to introspect and really like
narcissism, right?
Well, there's a yeah, exactly.
Well, remember after Fant Four Stick came out and it was terrible, Josh Trank goes, well, there was a cut that if they had let me release, you guys would have said it was amazing and it would have been the best. And you're just like, I don't think so.
Did Doctor Doom still look like a melted plastic toy soldier? Then I don't think so.
Yeah, those black outfits and stuff like that. It's just like, dude, no, that was so the wrong take. Can I say that he does go on to direct Captain America, but had Canon not bankrupted, Pion was set to direct the Spider-Man movie that they were going to make.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
Yeah. He was ready to roll into that. The Captain America movie they gave him was sort of the like, sorry, direct this. We have no money.
Yeah, we can't really do Spider-Man on this budget. Sorry.
Yeah, but Captain America.
There's a documentary somewhere, or at least there should be, of like talking to the people that were already in pre-production on that film about like what the plans were for what that movie was going to be.
I've seen some loose interviews and things that have been mentioned from people in canon and stuff like that about it. It would have looked like shit. I mean, it is what the answer is, right? Like, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know about like story wise, but it would have looked like garbage.
How a Canon Films version of Spider-Man would accomplish anything to do with web slinging is beyond me.
Well, I mean, that was kind of the thing that put the kibosh on a Spider-Man movie until it ended up happening was. Nobody could really crack how to do that with the technology of the 80s and 90s, right? It's just like, I don't know how you...
Without CG, yeah.
Yeah, and I think there might be a script floating around somewhere out there.
I could maybe see them doing it with some sort of rear projection in terms of just like but it would require like really intense helicopter shots of diving through cities.
Well, because like that's how Superman does it, but obviously that's how they did in the original Superman. Yeah. But obviously that's a little bit more straightforward. You know, it is the descent and the that kind of stuff that's very that was, but you also on Superman had massive studio resources, and a director was like, we will make this work, because that was Donner's whole thing. If we can't make the flying work, we can't make this movie work, so I'm gonna just keep pushing the effects as far as they can go for the time. And sure, that stuff looks dated today, but it doesn't actually look that bad if you watch that original Superman movie.
It works for the film.
Yeah.
When your tagline for the film is "You will believe a man can fly," like, you have to sell that.
And that's sort of the thing is, and I think that obviously, of course, that was the whole impetus of comic book films, was like, I just don't think Albert Pion was gonna go we will get this right. It's just like Superman works so well because you just had a guy who was just like, I am not gonna fuck this up. My commitment here is to represent Superman so well. And then, of course, when that guy's not there, you get the lesser Superman movies, one of which was made by Cannon. And so I do think it was, I just don't think there was a lot of we just love Spider-Man and we want to see Spider-Man realized on screen. It would have just been like, here's the thing, people like that, right?
How many of the scenes would have taken place in a strip club is my question.
Yeah. I think it's just, I'm
trying to remember. I don't think there's actually any nudity in the Captain America film.
No. And certainly there isn't in the Superman movie they made. They we do cover the action movies. They did make, there were Canon made family movies and stuff like that. They did make other stuff.
What?
Yeah. They released a lot of things. They also did some teen sex comedies that definitely had nudity in them.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That I can see that. But family films by the Canon Corporation sounds... I don't...
At their heyday, they were producing a lot of stuff. They were also, once again, they were very caught up in legitimacy. So there was also a period of time when they were getting big directors to go John Cassavetes, here's some money, make whatever you want. And this is actually, I actually kind of respect them for this, where it'd be like, okay, if we're selling a movie to a country, you can have the new Charles Bronson movie, but you also have to take the new Cassavetes movie. And so that was their, we're going to kind of backdoor art films in under our schlock, which I kind of respect them for. That didn't last because, once again, money, they just weren't good with the money. That was sort of the problem. But Canon, they just never, they just needed to own who they were, and instead they were like, no, we want to compete and be huge, and that did them in. This movie was their attempt to save them, and while this movie was successful, as it points out in the trivia, it was not enough to save them from bankruptcy. Even making $10 million on a $500,000 budget.
Not enough.
No, and so they limp along as straight to video stuff. But yeah, so Cyborg. That's Cyborg.
That's the movie.
It's
it certainly exists. Of the Van Damme canon, I wouldn't necessarily go out of my way to recommend it.
I think it's pretty forgettable within it. I think there's so much better around it. We did Kickboxer, which came out the same year, and even that's not amazing, but it's certainly a lot better than this.
Hell, I would say that even movies that are directly near it, obviously Bloodsport's a classic.
Bloodsport's
but
great,
Kickboxer, I would say Double Impact, which comes out 2 years after this,
which is great. That's how we're ending Jean-Claude Van Damme, is with Double Impact.
Awesome.
So, two Van Dammes. Which
I'm sad I didn't get to do the other double Van Damme movie, John.
I didn't think about that.
That's why I'm most upset about this month.
But I went with the I went from Replicant to Cyborg. I thought that was the connection there.
And what connection? What are you talking about?
Just the single word sci-fi words. I don't know. Cyborg, Replicant.
It's tenuous, but it's there.
I can't wait for him to make Android.
He's out of line, but I'll give him this one.
Yeah. But you know what? Hey, maybe some people like this movie, you guys. As always, I dig through the IMDb reviews to find the most misguided opinions I can. And I think this guy's pretty misguided. This comes to us from IMDb user Ivo Jazz 2002. And Lisman, this is very indicative of a lot of reviews we hear. And you'll know it just from the review is titled, "Why are people so judgmental?" ? Exclamation point.
Can I do a quick bullet point guess on the opinions of this review?
Go for it.
Okay.
They're going to lead with people take movies too seriously.
Okay.
They're going to compliment the hotness of the female stars of the movie. They're going to say Jean-Claude Van Damme, great as always. And they're going to say that people take things too seriously, again, reiterating their point. John, take it away.
Okay. Well, you're obviously a regular listener. I really liked this movie. It has a very special feel with the slow motion and music put together. To some people, since Mad Max is set in post-apocalyptic world, there should not be another movie made after that. What does bad acting even mean? The acting was fair, and the characters were much more meaningful than the weak and lifeless characters I see in today's films, which are utterly boring and fake. Perhaps somebody was expecting to see the King's Speech and got disappointed there is no dialogue, or there is not much dialogue. What dialogue do you expect from someone running for their lives? I thought the JCVD character of a tired man still fighting on the edge of his strength was really well conveyed. Fender was cool as hell. The women were pretty, memorable, and unique. The pirates' act of meaninglessness but aesthetic movements and screams were very cool and entertaining. Cheesy sells. If you don't watch this, watch Titanic. Or wait, if you don't know this, watch Titanic and look at its sales. Cyborg made its money, and I knew many people who owned the VHS. The 80s feel of the film cannot be recreated today and is something that will always have sentimental value to many viewers, including me. 10 out of 10 stars. So pretty close there, Gorgone. You got...
Yeah.
We didn't discuss how the fact that every one of the bandits in this movie doesn't have dialogue, but instead runs around screaming the whole film.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
As like a form of echolocation, I assumed at one
I can
point.
only assume. The other thing...
Yeah, they're all blind. Yeah.
You talk about the thing I love, how many times Fender, anytime he's facing off Van Damme, just goes, "Fucker."
Yeah. Yeah. At a certain point, I thought that was the only word he could say.
Fucker. Well, because most of his dialogue is just like, "Yeah, fucker." Like... He's just making monster growls. All right. Well, there have been pseudo sequels, but what if there was a true sequel to this movie? A true Van Damme style. We bring back Gibson Rickenbacker. All right. So we're gonna fire up our handy dandy action movie title generator. Although I'm setting this to science fiction mode.
And his brother Les Paul.
Okay. Well, already we know Eric Roberts is Les Paul, brother of Gibson Rickenbacker.
Yeah.
There we go. We got it.
Yeah.
Ooh, this should be interesting. Cyborg, Soldiers of the Vacuum.
Soldiers of the Vacuum.
So they're in space?
They can't be though, and that's the curve here. No, because it's post-apocalypse. Like, society has collapsed. We can't go into space. So, like, what is the other vacuum other than a power vacuum?
Ooh. Okay. Power vacuum's kind of interesting though, right?
I'm saying.
Yeah.
Having
Fender is dead.
Yeah.
So the bandit legions need a new.
They're running
who
wild.
Arises
the world is actually more chaotic because even though Fender was terrible, he at least like kept the bandits together. Now that they're all over the place, the world is even worse, and the cure is starting to come out. So maybe it's a movie more about cleaning up the world so humanity can come back. Okay, yes, we've cured the plague, but there's another plague of crime we have to deal with.
Right, exactly. It's not enough to cure the disease. The world has to be rebuilt.
Right.
Much like a cyborg.
We need to clean up a la a vacuum.
Many meanings. Very deep.
And the main villain is a cyborg. Like, we should have the main villain. Right?
Yes.
Well, that's the thing, is so in the power vacuum that exists, the bandits are sort of like running amok. the Institute. Sorry, I can't use that word. Fallout. The last
Aperture
bastion
Science.
of Aperture Science. No, wait, no, that's also been used.
Damn it.
Vault Tech. No, wait, hold on.
No, that's not it.
The
Skynet.
Fireflies?
No,
wait,
shit.
No, wait, hold on.
Damn it. No, God damn it.
The Atlanteans, sure, because they're from Atlanta. The Atlanteans,
Yeah.
are the scientists who
That makes
emerge
sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
with their cyborg technology that we know they possess.
Mhm.
And so they're looking to fill the vacuum with their like super soldiers, even if the people of the wasteland don't necessarily want to bow to their science oligarchy.
Oh, now it becomes a battle of faith. Oh, I like this. What do you believe
Well, there
in?
were a lot of religious undertones in the,
Yeah, we're saying
original
saying
film,
just
yeah.
make those make sense and have any grounding in plot.
No, because
Yeah.
then Gibson and Les Paul have to build an ark to get away from the cyborgs.
Wait. To space.
To space. There we go.
And
Bringing it
all-
back. Okay.
There we
So the movie
go.
doesn't take place in space. It ends with them taking the remnant of humanity to space.
And is it because
Setting up the third movie
Earth
that will be
wiped
set in
out?
space. Well, the world is now being in an attempt to dispense the cure, they've actually destroyed the world with an army of cyborgs. So I think that's the idea: is
Okay,
humanity
gotcha.
is the cyborgs are realizing this is the better way to be. So not only will we cure the disease, but we will also like take over as the dominant species.
Because the true disease, of
Like
course,
the
was
Borg.
man.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes,
Yes.
of course.
They
Yeah.
basically turn into the Borg or the Cybermen, right? Where it's like you will be upgraded.
Yes.
You will be improved. And so that's why the only way to get off it, Van Damme tries to fight the cyborgs, but realizes that's a losing cause. So he and Les Paul have to build an arc to space, which sets up the third movie, which is them in space.
Well, and of course, the first cyborg he fights is Les Paul, and he has to reactivate his humanity and bring him back into the fold.
Yes.
There we
Yes.
go. There we go.
There it
Yeah.
is, folks. Well, that's Cyborg Soldiers of the Vacuum. Look for that at a red box near you. Gorgone, thank you for coming on the show. Of course, Gorgone can be heard every week on a few shows here on the Punch Up Entertainment Network. You and I
One or
do.
two, yeah.
You and I do May the Panel Be With You every week, where we go through the history of Star Wars comics.
I believe at this point we're still in the 1970s, reading up on the adventures on Doom World and the aftermath therein. So actually, the last couple episodes have been about the Star Wars Special Edition.
We jumped to
adaptation.
1997 to cover Dark Horse's comic book adaptation of the Special Edition release of A New Hope, which is pretty fascinating.
Fascinating is the F word you're using there. That's interesting.
It's some F word, that's for sure. It's interesting. So you can go that of course you can either listen or watch. It's also on YouTube. And then of course both you and Michael are on every week on Material Components.
It's true. Having our own adventures in space.
And you can, of course, the best way to support the show and the network is to go to our Patreon page, patreon.podbean.com/punchup. There you can get exclusive content from the shows we've mentioned, as well as from this show. Listman, we're still putting out The Last to Be Curious, which is you, myself, and fellow Punch Up Entertainment podcast host Brendan Jones watching through all of the Fast and Furious movies. I think those are all out now. I think the whole Fast saga is out as of this, and we're taking a little break before we come back for the Mission Impossible series we're doing.
We have started.
We're recording those, and because they'll usually be like a
released
2 to 3 week break between sort of those series for you, the listeners.
But
while we catch up on the recordings of those, but yeah,
I think as a franchise, Fast and the Furious has like maybe higher highs, but definitely lower lows. I think as the Mission Impossible franchise is easier to like work your way through.
Well, I stand by that the Mission Impossible franchise is like the filet mignon to the Fast and the Furious's burger, right? Like, you know what I mean? It's like it's just like they come out less often, but like each one feels just so much more crafted.
And even watching what most argue is the worst Mission Impossible movie, I think for me Yeah, too. It's still, for me, there's something about those movies that I am more interested in than Fast and the Furious.
I mean,
I don't know
look,
what it is.
you're preaching to the choir on that. I've often said Mission Impossible is my #1 movie franchise. I adore those movies. I obsess over those movies. And that will culminate in us doing. We are going to do a from theater review of Dead Reckoning Part 1 when it comes out next month.
Man, everyone else in the theater is going to hate you for bringing all that recording equipment.
Excuse me, hold on. Got to set this up here. Hold on. Can everybody be quiet? I'm doing a level check.
Can you turn off the ads? I'm trying to get some wild sound.
Yeah, hold on. Yeah. Yes. Well, by that I mean literally from the actual theater, not after we see it. Yes. But yeah, so make sure you go over that. There's shows at all levels there, and of course your donations help the network. Next week on the show, Listman, we continue Jean-Claude Van Damme. We return back to the world of underground fighting with Lionheart.
Yes, and this is often argued as being one of Van Damme's more popular.
Well, I would say that, you know, what's interesting is these episodes back to back, and we're literally just going year to year here, 89 to 90. But we have Cyborg is often thought of as one of Van Damme's worst films, and we're now going to what is considered one of his absolute best films, Lionheart, also from Material Components, we're going to have Elliot Lewis with us for that episode.
Hey. Is that the one where Van Damme meets a lion voiced by Sean Connery, who he gets like a piece of his heart from?
God, I wish that was the case.
It could be.
I will just say the poster does proclaim Van Damme is Lionheart.
Oh.
So he is the Lionheart.
He is the Lionheart. And Lisman, as always, I will ask, would you like to hear the tagline? This one's pretty good.
Okay, well, lay it on me.
When the streets are a jungle, there can only be one king. That's pretty good. Van Damme is Lionheart. So that'll be next week on the show. Poster's just him in front of a New York City scape, just doing a fighting pose. What more do you need?
Okay.
So that'll be next week on the show, but that's going to do it for this week's episode of The Action Shelf. I'm John Campbell.
And I'm Michael Listman.
Till next week, get yourself some action.
The Action Shelf. The Action Shelf.